Ladies and gentlemen, every great change in life begins with a simple decision, the decision to never settle for less than you deserve. Most people drift through life accepting whatever comes their way. They accept jobs they dislike, relationships that drain their energy, and habits that hold them back. And then they wonder why life never changes. The truth is, life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you're willing to tolerate. If you tolerate mediocrity, you'll get mediocrity. If you demand excellence from yourself and the world around you, you will be met with opportunities that match your higher standard. Your life, in every sense, is a reflection of the standards you set for yourself. If you want to understand the quality of your relationships, your health, your finances, and even your sense of self-worth, look closely at the standards you've been willing to live by. Standards act like invisible boundaries. They determine what you accept and what you reject, what you strive for and what you allow to slide by. Most people believe that their circumstances dictate their outcomes, but the truth is far more empowering. Your outcomes are shaped by what you demand from yourself and from life. If you demand very little, you'll get very little. If you demand more, not from others, but from your own effort, focus, and commitment, you open the door to extraordinary change. Think for a moment about the individuals you admire the most. They are not simply lucky. They didn't stumble into success by accident. They hold themselves to higher standards in their thoughts, their habits, their discipline, and their vision. They wake up each day expecting more of themselves than most people would even dare to attempt. Their standards are like a compass, guiding every decision and shaping every step they take. That is why they achieve things others only dream about. The difference between them and those who remain stuck is not talent, not even opportunity, but the level at which they refuse to settle. In many ways, your standards define the story you tell yourself about what you deserve. If you think it's acceptable to stay in a job that drains your spirit, you'll keep working there. If you believe it's acceptable to live in poor health, you won't change your habits. If you decide it's acceptable to let fear and doubt hold you back, you will never move forward. Every result you see in your life today is tied to a standard you either consciously or unconsciously accepted in the past. Raising your standards is often uncomfortable, and that discomfort is the very sign that growth is taking place. When you demand more from yourself than your current circumstances allow, you create tension, and that tension pushes you to think, act, and strive differently. It forces you to learn new skills, to make new decisions, to leave behind what no longer serves you. This is why so few people actually raise their standards. It requires facing the truth about the gap between where you are and where you want to be. But that gap is not your enemy. It is your opportunity. Imagine two individuals standing at the same starting point. One says, "I'll accept whatever comes my way." The other says, "I will only settle for a life of growth, contribution, and excellence." Both will face challenges, but their standards will shape their choices in very different ways. The first person will adapt to circumstances and often surrender to them. The second person will adapt circumstances to their vision and find ways to rise above them. Over time, the gap between these two lives will grow wider and wider until it seems as if they lived in entirely different worlds. Your standards are not fixed. They can be raised the moment you decide to raise them. History is filled with examples of people who transformed their lives, not because they suddenly gained more resources, but because they changed the level of what they were willing to accept. A person who once thought it was acceptable to procrastinate might decide that from now on, action is their new standard. Someone who once tolerated negative influences might decide that positivity, discipline, and strong boundaries are the new baseline. With that single internal shift, everything else begins to align with the higher standard. It's easy to say that you want a better life, but wanting alone doesn't change much. Many people want better relationships, better health, better finances, yet they continue to tolerate the very habits and choices that keep them stuck. The real transformation begins when you stop treating your goals as wishes and start treating them as non-negotiable standards. A person who has a standard for daily exercise will not debate with themselves every morning about whether or not to work out. It's simply part of who they are. A person who has a standard of kindness and integrity doesn't have to think twice before acting in alignment with those values. It's automatic. Raising your standards turns effort into a way of being, and when that shift happens, success stops being a distant dream and becomes a natural outcome. One of the most powerful truths about raising your standards is that it alters not only how you act, but also what you attract. Life tends to mirror the energy you project. When you raise your standards, you start to send out a signal to the world, to the people around you, and even to yourself, that you will no longer settle for mediocrity. Suddenly, you find yourself in conversations you never thought you'd have, meeting people who inspire you, encountering opportunities you once overlooked. These things were always there, but your previous standards kept you blind to them. By elevating your expectations, you open your eyes to possibilities that match the new level at which you've chosen to live. It's important to understand that raising your standards is not about arrogance or perfectionism. It's about alignment. It's about aligning your actions, your beliefs, and your environment with the vision of the life you truly want to live. You don't raise your standards to impress others. You raise them to honor yourself. You raise them because you recognize that you were meant for more than what you've been accepting. You raise them because you understand that the quality of your life will never consistently exceed the quality of your standards. Every great transformation begins with a moment of decision, the decision to draw a line in the sand and say, I will not go back to living below this point. That decision becomes the spark that ignites your creativity, your courage, and your resilience. From that moment forward, you are no longer asking life for what it will give you. You are declaring to life what you will give to it, and in doing so, you shift from being a passive participant to an active creator of your future. Your life is like a mirror, reflecting back what you have decided is acceptable. If you want to change the reflection, you must first change what you demand of yourself. That is why raising your standards is the foundation of all meaningful progress. It is the internal shift that precedes every external success. The day you stop tolerating excuses, the day you stop settling for average, is the day you open the door to a better, richer, and more fulfilling existence. Most people remain stuck in the same place for years, not because they lack talent or opportunity, but because they continue to tolerate the very things that hold them back. Toleration is one of the greatest enemies of progress. Every time you make peace with a bad habit, every time you excuse a toxic relationship, every time you allow procrastination or fear to dictate your actions, you are silently agreeing to stay where you are. The life you experience today is not just a result of your dreams or intentions. It is largely a reflection of what you've been willing to tolerate. Think about it. When you tolerate being late, you attract more chaos and disorganization into your days. When you tolerate negative people who drain your energy, you allow their influence to shape your mindset. When you tolerate self-doubt, you hand over your future to hesitation and missed chances. It's not what happens to you that defines you. It's what you allow to persist. Toleration acts like an anchor tied to your spirit. You may feel as if you're rowing hard toward your goals, but as long as that anchor remains, your progress will be painfully slow or non-existent. The danger of toleration is that it often begins in small, almost invisible ways. You skip one day of discipline telling yourself it's no big deal. You stay quiet when someone treats you unfairly, believing it's better not to stir conflict. You delay making an important decision, convincing yourself you'll handle it later. Each small act of toleration seems harmless in the moment, but together they form a powerful chain that keeps you locked in mediocrity. Before you realize it, you've built a life that is far below what you're capable of achieving, not because you consciously chose it, but because you never set boundaries against the things that undermine your potential. To break free from this cycle, you must first acknowledge what you've been tolerating. This requires honesty and courage, because it's never easy to confront the patterns that have quietly shaped your life. You might have to admit that you've tolerated unhealthy habits for years. You might have to accept that you've stayed in relationships that diminish you or in environments that crush your spirit. This kind of self-reflection can be uncomfortable, but it is also liberating because awareness is the first step toward change. Once you recognize what you've been tolerating, the next step is to refuse to accept it any longer. This refusal is not a one-time decision. It is a daily commitment to yourself. It's the decision to draw a new line in the sand and say, this is no longer acceptable in my life. That might mean saying no to people who demand your time but don't respect it. It might mean cutting ties with habits that feel comforting but keep you stagnant. It might mean facing fears you've long avoided so that they no longer have power over you. One of the reasons toleration is so destructive is that it consumes energy. Every time you tolerate something that is out of alignment with your true desires, it drains a part of your mental, emotional, or even physical strength. It creates stress, resentment, and inner conflict. You may not notice it immediately, but over time, it erodes your sense of purpose and resilience. Imagine what your life could feel like if all that energy currently spent tolerating was freed up and redirected toward growth, creativity, and progress. The shift would be extraordinary. A major part of growth is realizing that letting go of what no longer serves you is not a loss. It's an act of self-respect. Many people cling to harmful patterns simply because they're familiar. They fear the discomfort of change, so they keep tolerating the same old situations even as they wish for a better future. But the truth is that you cannot welcome new opportunities into a life that's already filled with things that hold you back. You have to create space for the better life you want by clearing out the habits, people, and beliefs that no longer deserve your acceptance. When you stop tolerating what diminishes you, you send a powerful message to yourself and to the world about your worth. You start to live in alignment with the idea that you deserve more, not because of entitlement, but because you've chosen to honor your potential. This shift in self-perception often leads to dramatic external changes. People who once disrespected your time may begin to treat you differently because they sense your new boundaries. Opportunities that seemed out of reach may appear because you now operate at a higher level of commitment and focus. It's worth remembering that toleration is often disguised as patience or kindness. We tell ourselves we're being tolerant because we want to be understanding, flexible, or forgiving, but there's a critical difference between being compassionate and allowing harmful patterns to persist. True compassion for yourself sometimes means walking away from things that hinder your growth. It means understanding that your time and energy are finite, and you cannot afford to squander them on what keeps you stuck. Another challenge is that the things we tolerate often feel safe because they are familiar. We'd rather endure the discomfort we know than risk facing the unknown. Yet the unknown is where growth happens. The moment you stop tolerating the familiar sources of limitation, you open the door to new possibilities, and with them new challenges and rewards. Growth always involves stepping into uncertainty, but that uncertainty is also the birthplace of transformation. To live a life of higher standards, you must be willing to disrupt your patterns of toleration. This doesn't mean you'll never face setbacks or moments of weakness. Everyone does. But it means you will no longer quietly accept the things that hold you back. You will no longer let old habits, toxic influences, or fear dictate your choices. You'll replace toleration with deliberate action, boundaries, and the courage to stand firm in the face of resistance. Every person who has achieved meaningful success has had to confront this truth. They had to stop tolerating their own excuses. They had to stop tolerating the opinions of others that limited them. They had to stop tolerating environments that were inconsistent with their vision. The moment they made that decision, their lives began to shift because they freed themselves from the invisible chains that once held them in place. Your future is shaped not by the obstacles you face, but by the limits you are willing to accept. When you raise your standards and refuse to tolerate what diminishes you, you reclaim the power to shape your destiny. You declare that you are no longer content to live by default, allowing circumstances to dictate your path. Instead, you choose to live by design, guided by principles that reflect your true potential. There is a remarkable truth about life that often goes unnoticed. You do not simply chase opportunities, you attract them. The quality of what you draw into your life, the relationships, the career breakthroughs, the friendships, even the challenges you face, is deeply influenced by the standards you set for yourself. When your standards are low, you often find yourself surrounded by situations and people that reflect that level. But the moment you decide to elevate your standards, to demand more of yourself and from life, something shifts. You begin to attract experiences and individuals who align with your new level of expectation. It may feel like magic at first, but in reality, it is the natural consequence of changing your energy, your focus, and your mindset. When you think about attraction, it's easy to believe it's something external, as though the universe suddenly delivers better opportunities to your door. But what actually changes is you. When you raise your standards, you begin to behave differently. You carry yourself with more confidence. You speak with more clarity. You treat yourself with more respect, and others notice that. You stop engaging in activities that drain your potential and instead commit to habits that nurture your growth. This internal transformation shifts the way you show up in the world, and the world responds in kind. Imagine someone who has always accepted mediocrity in their work. They don't push themselves, they don't seek to learn more, and they avoid challenges that could help them grow. As a result, they often find themselves stuck in jobs that don't inspire them, surrounded by people who think and act at that same level. Now imagine that same person making a conscious decision to raise their standards. They decide that doing the bare minimum is no longer acceptable. They begin to study more, to take initiative, to show up earlier, to present themselves as someone worthy of greater responsibility. Over time, they start to notice a shift. Supervisors begin to trust them with more meaningful work. Colleagues start to look up to them. Better job opportunities arise because their energy and attitude have changed. The opportunities were always there, but they weren't previously visible to someone operating at a lower standard. This principle applies not just to careers, but to every area of life. If you want to attract meaningful relationships, you cannot continue to accept behavior that disrespects your values or undermines your worth. The moment you raise your standards for how you expect to be treated, you stop giving time and energy to people who cannot meet that standard. You become more discerning in your choices, and as a result, you naturally create space for people who appreciate and respect you. Likewise, if you want to attract opportunities for growth, wealth, or health, you cannot keep habits that contradict those goals. You cannot hope for financial stability while tolerating careless spending. You cannot hope for vibrant health while accepting a lifestyle that neglects your body. Raising your standards creates alignment between your desires and your actions, and that alignment is what draws better circumstances into your life. A powerful aspect of attraction is that it does not require chasing. Many people exhaust themselves trying to chase success or force relationships or opportunities to happen. But when you elevate your standards and live in alignment with them, you begin to radiate a kind of quiet confidence that naturally draws in what resonates with your energy. People are drawn to those who have clarity about who they are and what they stand for. Opportunities gravitate toward those who are prepared to meet them. This is why raising your standards is so transformative. It changes you from within so that the world outside begins to meet you at the new level you have chosen. Consider how energy influences your environment. If you carry an attitude of negativity, fear, or self-doubt, you will often find yourself surrounded by people and situations that mirror those emotions. But when you cultivate discipline, optimism, and purpose, you attract others who share those qualities or who can support your growth. This isn't about mystical forces, it's about the fact that human beings respond to the energy and signals they perceive in others. If you consistently act like someone who values growth, excellence, and authenticity, you will naturally repel things that don't match that frequency and draw closer to those that do. It's also important to recognize that attraction is not instantaneous. Many people become discouraged because they raise their standards but don't see immediate changes. But attraction is a process, not a moment. It takes time for your new habits, decisions, and mindset to reflect outwardly in your circumstances. Think of it like planting seeds. The moment you decide to raise your standards, you've planted the seeds for a better future. But those seeds require time, effort, and care to grow. You continue to water them through consistent action, self-discipline, and perseverance. Eventually, the harvest arrives. New opportunities, healthier relationships, improved results, and it often feels as if they appeared out of nowhere, when in truth they were drawn to you by the person you had been becoming all along. Many people misunderstand this concept and believe that raising standards means waiting passively for good things to happen. On the contrary, it requires action. It requires making deliberate choices every day that reflect the life you intend to attract. You cannot claim to have high standards for success while spending your days in distraction or half-hearted effort. You cannot claim to have high standards for personal integrity while compromising your values in small ways. The world responds not to what we say we want, but to what we consistently embody. One of the most liberating realizations is that you don't have to convince others to treat you better or to offer you more opportunities. You simply have to demonstrate through your own actions that you are someone who lives at a higher standard. People who value what you bring will recognize it and move closer to you. Those who don't will often distance themselves, and that is a gift because it clears the way for the right connections to enter your life. The journey of attraction is also about letting go. Sometimes, in order to draw in what aligns with your elevated standards, you must first release what no longer fits. This can mean walking away from friendships or environments that keep you tied to your old level. It can mean breaking habits that once felt comfortable but are now incompatible with your growth. Letting go can be difficult because it often means leaving behind familiar things, but it is necessary if you want to make space for the new. As you continue to live by your raised standards, you may notice that opportunities begin to show up in subtle ways. A chance meeting with someone who shares your vision, an unexpected offer that aligns with your goals, an idea that sparks a new direction. These moments are not accidents. They are signs that your life is starting to align with the energy and focus you've chosen. The more consistently you hold yourself to your higher standards, the more frequently these opportunities appear. The beauty of this process is that it empowers you. Instead of waiting for external circumstances to change, you change yourself. You take control of the only thing you truly can, your own thoughts, behaviors, and expectations, and by doing so, you reshape the world around you. Raising your standards shifts you from a position of hoping for a better life to actively attracting it, not by demanding it from others, but by becoming the kind of person for whom that better life is natural. Every significant transformation in life begins the moment you make a decision, not a half-hearted wish, not a passing thought that you hope things will improve someday, but a true, committed decision that you will no longer settle for less than what you know you're capable of. The difference between people who remain stuck in the same patterns for years and those who break through to new levels of success often comes down to this one thing: the power to decide and commit to change right now. Far too many people wait for the perfect conditions before taking action. They wait for more confidence, more time, more resources, or more approval from others. They tell themselves they'll start when they feel ready, but that feeling never arrives because readiness is not something you wait for. It is something you create by deciding to move forward despite uncertainty. When you look back at the turning points in your life, you will notice that they were often sparked by a single decision. Perhaps you decided to leave an environment that was holding you back, or to dedicate yourself fully to a goal you had been putting off, or to finally let go of a fear that had controlled you for too long. In that instant, the course of your life shifted because you stopped wavering between options and chose a clear path. That is the power of a decision. It doesn't mean you instantly have all the answers or that you know exactly how the journey will unfold. It means you draw a line and declare that you are no longer available for your old excuses, your old limitations, or your old patterns. Deciding and committing are two parts of the same process. Deciding sets your direction, but commitment keeps you moving forward when the journey gets hard. Many people make decisions in moments of inspiration, but fail to sustain them because they never truly commit. They expect change to feel easy or convenient, and when it doesn't, they slip back into old habits. Commitment means you are willing to face discomfort, to push through resistance, and to stay the course even when progress feels slow. It's the difference between wishing for a better life and being willing to pay the price required to achieve it. There's a powerful psychological shift that happens the moment you decide and commit to change. Your mind stops treating your goal as a distant dream and begins to treat it as a necessity. When something becomes a must rather than a maybe, you start thinking, acting, and problem-solving in ways that align with that new standard. You no longer ask, "Can I do this?" but instead, "How will I do this?" That shift from questioning to determination unlocks creativity, resourcefulness, and persistence that you may not have realized you possessed. One of the biggest obstacles to making that kind of decision is fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of stepping into the unknown. But what many people don't realize is that indecision is itself a decision. By refusing to choose, you are choosing to stay where you are. You are deciding to remain in your current circumstances with all the dissatisfaction that comes with them. The cost of indecision is often far greater than the cost of making a bold choice and learning from the experience. Deciding and committing to change also requires taking responsibility for your life. It means acknowledging that while you cannot control every external circumstance, you can control your response to them. Too often, people delay their decisions because they blame their situation on others, their parents, their boss, their partner, the economy. But as long as you wait for someone else to change before you take action, you surrender your power. When you accept full responsibility for your growth, you reclaim that power. You realize that no matter what has happened before, you can make a new choice right now that will lead you in a different direction. It's important to understand that commitment is not about waiting until you feel motivated. Motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls with your mood and your circumstances. Commitment is deeper than motivation because it's anchored in your values and your vision for your life. It's what keeps you showing up on the days when you feel tired, discouraged, or tempted to quit. When you decide to change and truly commit, you stop negotiating with yourself. You no longer give in to the endless debate about whether or not you'll take the next step. You simply follow through because that is the standard you have set for yourself. Some people believe they need clarity before they can commit, but often the reverse is true. Clarity grows out of commitment. When you make a decision and start moving in a particular direction, you gain insight that you could never get from standing still and overthinking. The path reveals itself as you walk it. Action brings information, and that information helps you refine your approach and strengthen your resolve. Waiting for perfect clarity before you act is often just another form of procrastination. There will always be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt along the way. Committing to change doesn't mean you'll never stumble. It means that when you stumble, you get back up and keep moving. It means you refuse to let temporary difficulties turn into permanent excuses. Every time you persevere through a challenge, you reinforce your own belief in your ability to follow through, and that belief becomes a powerful source of confidence. When you decide and commit to change, you also begin to attract resources and opportunities that weren't visible before. This isn't because the world suddenly rearranges itself, but because your focus shifts. You start to notice possibilities that align with your new direction. You meet people who can help you because you're now operating at the level where they show up. You see solutions where before you only saw obstacles. The act of committing opens doors that remain closed to those who hesitate. Perhaps the most freeing aspect of making a firm decision is that it relieves you from the endless cycle of doubt and second guessing. Indecision is exhausting. It drains your mental and emotional energy because you're constantly revisiting the same questions. When you decide and commit, you reclaim that energy and direct it toward progress. You no longer waste time wondering if you should move forward because you've already chosen to do so. Instead, you focus on how to move forward more effectively. Every great achievement, whether personal or professional, can be traced back to that pivotal moment when someone decided to change and committed fully to that choice. They didn't wait for perfect timing or for someone to give them permission. They acted on their decision and allowed their commitment to carry them through the inevitable obstacles. That is why the ability to decide and commit is one of the most powerful tools you will ever have. It's the foundation upon which all other progress is built. So as you reflect on everything you've heard today, remember this. The life you long for isn't somewhere far away, waiting for the right time to appear. It is already within your reach, waiting for you to raise your standards, to stop tolerating what holds you back, to attract what aligns with your highest vision, and to decide with unshakable commitment that you will no longer settle for less than you deserve. Change doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice. The moment you choose to live at a higher standard is the moment you begin to reshape your destiny. Do not wait for the perfect conditions. Do not wait for someone else to hand you permission. The power to transform your future lies in the choices you make today. Start by expecting more of yourself, by standing firm against the things that diminish you, by opening your heart and mind to the opportunities that are already seeking you, and by making the decision here and now to step into the life you were meant to live. Every great journey begins with a single step, but that step must be taken with conviction. The moment you take it, you send a signal to yourself and to the world that you are ready to rise. Let this be your moment. Decide today that your old limits no longer define you. Commit to the path of growth, and watch as life meets you at the level of your new standards. Your better future isn't waiting, it's responding, and it's ready for you to claim it.